we're talking with Mike Schaefer, Husker247. Schaefer, let's switch gears to football here for the last few minutes. Obviously, a lot of activity going on in the transfer portal, both to and from Nebraska. I want to start with a couple predictions that were made that a big offensive tackle from Alabama is predicted to go to Nebraska. Do you like where Nebraska's at there? And
with Pritchett?
Yeah, with Pritchett from Alabama. And do you think that is the final piece they need to kind of fill the holes in this transfer class?
Yeah, I mean, cards completely on the table. I don't have a lot of connection into Pritchett, and we haven't been hearing a lot on that. So that would definitely be just going off of what the online vibes are. And when people are putting in the crystal ball predictions at this point, it's usually coming with the insurance of what's going to happen. So it does feel like Nebraska is a pretty heavy favorite here for the Alabama tackle. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I've watched Elijah Pritchett play, so I'm not going to give you a big breakdown of what he's done well and everything else. I know that Pro Football Focus dinged him really hard. He played a lot as a young guy. So I you're getting, if he ends up at Nebraska, you're getting someone that has experience at an area where you're lacking in experience. So you're creating some competition there, and you're allowing for the addition of an offensive lineman to kind of help, push where you're at with a Grant Branks and a Brock Knutson, and what you're going to do with a Gunnar Gatula and what that tackle picture looks like. I just think, I think even bigger than what happens in the transfer portal for Nebraska's offensive line is still very much the internal development of where those guys are at as you get through spring ball, where some of the offensive linemen, especially some of the in-state kids, where some of these guys are, within the program, are they going to be able to help you if you have an injury or two? Are they going to be pushing a guy like this if he were to come into the program? So I think a lot of it for me, it'd be great to add an offensive lineman out of the transfer portal. Nebraska clearly wants to. I still think the bigger thing with the offensive line is what happens in internal development. Like, I just think that's the bigger piece of all of this. Like their high school recruiting of the offensive line, how Raiola and staff are able to develop those guys, how Holgorsen calls the offense to maximize what they do well. All of that is just a bigger deal to me than what happens in the portal, because I just think offensive line recruiting in the portal is, you either get a stud, or, for the lack of, and I apologize for using this player specifically, or you're getting a Hunter Anthony. You're not necessarily you're not.
Well, nice pull.
There's really not a lot in between there. You know what I mean, though? Offensive line portal recruiting is way more difficult than just they can't close. No, it's not that they can't close. Everybody wants players in the trenches. It is really, really elbows out, and it is a fight. And it's why you see some of the same teams. Obviously, losing the kid to his coaching staff that went from Washington State to Wake Forest is unique. But for everyone else, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of teams involved.
Jay, as you look at the class that Nebraska's brought in from the portal, do you feel better about, and let's assume they get an offensive tackle somewhere, whether it's Pritchett or somebody else. Let's say they get some offensive tackle piece to give them a little bit more depth, because they clearly want that. Do you feel better about Nebraska's roster moving into the spring now that we have a pretty good idea of what that portal class is going to look like? Or did you like it better before the guys that left Nebraska entered the portal?
You and I had a really interesting conversation after the Iowa game, where I was a little concerned about how things were sort of sitting, or who was going to be in some of these critical spots. I feel like they've done a nice job adding veterans that can step in in a year and then move on without blocking some of your young players. What I'm talking about is a Trent Watson comes in and he's going to have a year and he can kind of replace your John Bullock, but he's not going to take away from where you want to go with Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones and Vincent Shavers and some of your young guys. I think it's good to have some of these veterans that have produced that can step in and likely are going to be starters, but aren't necessarily blocking. And then they did a nice job of adding some young players. I mean, obviously, you got to talk about Williams Nwaneri. You hope that there's still that big upside there, that he can bring it off of the edge. They brought in a couple of defensive linemen. I'm still curious what the picture looks like at nose tackle, what ultimately ends up there. But for the most part, I think they've done well. Like, I don't know that at wide receiver in particular, it feels like it's a slam dunk. I don't know that there's any other position where I'm just like, oh man, this has just been fantastic or this has just been trash. It feels like a lot of it is Dankey, Hunter, the other Kentucky wide receiver. Like, that is a nice haul at a wide receiver position where you lost some talented guys in there. I mean, I will go to bat for what I think Jaylen Lloyd can be and the type of worker that he is. And of everyone that's gone into the portal, that's like the one where it just kind of like hit hard for me because I wanted to see that guy have success at Nebraska. I know what it means.
Borkature for me. I'm this whole.
Well, Borkature is just odd because it's hard for me to internalize like, hey, new coach comes in, all of a sudden you're being used in a way that maybe you could have been used all along, and then you still leave. And so like that one's difficult, but I don't know what the internal is like over there. I don't know if, he was just done. I don't know if it's hard to play tight end for the offensive coordinator that wasn't using you all along. So I can't speak to all of that. But for the most part, I think they've done well in the portal. It just feels like the biggest difference make or the biggest position room jump happened at wide receiver. But that's also where they lost a guy in Jaylen Lloyd, where, like I said, that one just hit, and it hits in a different way. Like, it's not, I can't promise he's going to be the best player that left Nebraska by any means, but I think he has the upside, certainly.
That's Mike Schaefer, Husker247. Schaefer, we appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Schaefer.
All right, guys. Have a good one.